Hi, everybody. Welcome to our parenting class of 0 to 5 years olds. This is our fourth video. Last week's video in class was on teaching your child to obey. And I got to say, boy, I wish that more of you would be able to attend class on Sundays. I know some of you are teaching. I know some of you are facing those ongoing challenges of COVID, but it's such a great opportunity because the videos, whereas they lay the groundwork for the classes, on Sunday morning, we're able to have questions you guys can ask and discussion, and we're able to flesh that out more. And I got to say, I watched last week's video back, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, that's good stuff, but some of my examples really aren't 0 to 5 range, and I apologize for that. If you have questions, though, but since I know some of you are watching the videos and can't come, email those to me at roncounselor@gmail.com, and we'll try to work some of those question answers time into our videos, or maybe if we get enough questions, we'll do a one last separate video just designated to answering your questions. But please email those. Okay, so this week's video, the title of it is Nurture Growth, Do Not Exasperate Your Child. Okay, so there's a concept that a lot of you have heard before. It's given different names. When it comes to couples, it may be a marital bank account or love bank or love tank. When it comes to individuals, the concept is usually called your emotional bank account. And this illustration is given in different ways. Fill your bucket, fill your cup, but it's all kind of very similar. And if you haven't heard it before, what this means is that every person has an emotional bank account. And that has a lot to do with how much they feel loved, how much they feel filled up, and how good they feel about themselves. So think of it this way, that your child has an emotional bank account, just like you probably have a financial bank account. And just like if you keep your money at Busey, money goes in, that's a deposit, money goes out, that's a withdrawal. And the higher the financial balance is at Busey, the better you feel about your finances. And the more confidence you have and the more stable you feel with your finances. Okay, so your child, just like you, has an emotional bank account that starts immediately. Even if they're not able to think through things, it starts immediately. And this emotional bank account has, the higher the balance is, just the better they feel about themselves, the more that they're really feeling loved. And that is built by many things, but it has to do with how you treat your child. Okay, so for instance, let me give you an illustration. Okay, so there's a video that's out there. You could call it famous or infamous. It's a little painful for me to watch. And it's a video in research that was done about a mother and her baby. Okay, so in this video, the mother is instructed to give full attention to her baby and look at her baby, smile at her baby, make loving noises, and give just full attention. And then the mother is asked to just stop at some point and just kind of, be stone-faced and not even quite look at the baby. Okay, so it's kind of stonewalling. Mom's there, but not really there. Okay, so in this video, in this research that was done, you have this mother and she's smiling at the baby and holding the baby, facing her, and you could see the baby is just smiling and mom's making soothing little noises, and you could just see the baby responding and they're interacting, and like mom is just praising every little thing with the baby, and you could just see that bond. And then suddenly mom just goes blank and she kind of then looks away. And at first you see the baby doing all the things the baby had been doing, giving little bids for attention, trying to get mom to notice her. And yet this time, mom is not noticing. Mom is looking away. And you see that baby suddenly start to change, where the baby starts amping it up more to try to get that reaction that the baby was getting just a moment before. And when that doesn't work, then you see the baby starting to get upset. And of course, this doesn't go on for real long. Shortly after that, then mom re-engages and they're all good with each other. But it really shows how important, even as a baby, mom and dad's reaction to that child. And it can make such a difference in the emotional bank account, because when mom was paying attention to the baby, that baby was feeling good and stable and loved and had this sense that I'm not alone. And then suddenly it was like the baby was alone and mom was not there and mom could not be accessed. And it just really lowered the balance there for that moment in that baby's emotional bank account. I mean, you think about it. How much attention do you pay your kids? When you pay your kids a lot of attention, then that's going to fill that emotional bank account. If you look at them, if you listen, if you pay attention to them, if you praise what they do, it's going to fill that account. And the more full that account is, the more this child is going to feel good about themselves and good about the relationship with you. So praise is very important. Just notice. Sometimes it's just noticing and commenting on what they're doing. I've told you that recently I dusted off my teaching skills and for little kids and came out and taught the 2 through 5-year-olds at church. And, you know, I wasn't sure exactly what to do, even though I have grandkids that, you know, fall in that area, because, you know, I look over and there's Carl, and he's just like popular Carl with the kids, and they're like all over him and stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not Carl, not young, not cool. And, you know, I see Carl and Jessica getting on the floor with the kids, and I'm thinking, man, if I get down on the floor, you know, it takes a lot of work to get back up again, you know, and my back can get hurt easily. And I'm thinking, oh, what can I bring to these kids? And one of the things I tried to bring to it was just gearing in with what the kids were doing and really noticing it. And I would notice what they were doing and I would comment back to them. And I noticed the very first class, you know, it was like I wasn't even there because I was new to a lot of the little ones there. But I noticed over time that as I noticed what they were doing, and it might be as simple as saying, oh, Emerson, you're going down the slide. All right, 1, 2, 3, you did it. You know, after a while, I noticed that she would notice, and other kids would notice I was there. And suddenly, they would be looking back at me. And so sometimes it's just noticing your kids, but it's also being able to encourage them and to praise them for what they've done, to point out the good stuff. And so that's really all about nurturing, and that's so important because there's so many kids that grow up to be adults who never felt like their parents were proud of them. And that's hard, that's painful. And you want your kids to grow up to honor you. And to do that, you want to make sure you're filling their bank account. So let's look at a scripture, Ephesians chapter 6, starting in verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy life on the earth. Okay, I know we looked at this passage last week, right? And I want to come down, though, to verse 4. Fathers, and I think this could easily say fathers and mothers, but it says fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Okay, so what is the training and the instruction of the Lord? Well, last week in the video, I read 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 16 and 17 and what preceded that. And we talked about how Timothy was raised by his mother, his grandmother, to know the Lord. He saw Paul's example. We also looked at 16 and 17 that talks about correcting, rebuking, and training in righteousness. Training instruction of the Lord is all about teaching your child, training your child in righteousness to grow up, to obey the laws of the land, to be able to obey the Lord, to follow Jesus, to love God, to love other people. Part of training in righteousness comes with correcting their course of behavior. So how do we do that in a way that doesn't exasperate the child? Okay, well, let's look at another passage, Galatians chapter 6, verse 1. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, okay, I want to stop right here and just say, I'm not talking about your 0 through 5-year-olds or sinning, but think of it in terms of brothers and sisters, if your child is caught disobeying, okay, or gets whatever, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Think about that last part. So often we can correct or discipline our kids, and if we're not careful, we can end up sinning as a result. If we start getting impatient or angry and do something out of anger, then, hey, we're falling into our own temptation. We're not restoring them gently, and we start exasperating the child. Starting in verse 7, do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest, so we do not give up. All this nurturing, this training we do with our children, we're planting seeds. We're sowing. And Paul says, through the Spirit of God, don't become weary in doing good. Don't get all frustrated. Keep sowing, keep watering, and in time, it will reap a harvest. When you teach and you guide, when you protect, you're sowing and you're planting seeds. And there are times when your child needs to be restored to obedience. You want to train your child in a way, though, that nurtures growth. You want to bring your child up in a loving, stable environment. You never want to exasperate your child. Okay, some of you are wondering, what does the word exasperate mean? And boy, that sounds a lot like the word exacerbate. Okay, I think exacerbate is more you add to and make something worse. Exasperate, though, means to infuriate, to anger, to annoy, to irritate intensely, to send in a rage, to inflame, to antagonize, provoke, and drive to distraction. Oftentimes responses to parenting that isn't loving and nurturing. So something very, very important is be on the same page with your spouse. Your child needs to be able to rely on the consistency of your partnership. And I'm going to talk more about that in the next video. But it means you need to talk about and plan your expectations and your consequences. Your child needs you to be on the same page with each other. That way your child grows up in an environment where he can count on you. He can count on the expectations. He can count on the consequences. It's not a guessing game. You exasperate your child when you're inconsistent and when mom and dad have different expectations. That means you got to talk. And many times in my counseling practice, I'm recommending to parents, have a time during the week where you can just sit down and talk about your kids and talk about, okay, what's going well with Matt? What's going well with Abby? What's going well with Braden? What are some things we need to work on? How can we be on the same page with our expectations and consequences? That will make sure that you're not exasperating your kids by being on the same page. With Patty and I, we found that in our parenting, fortunately, there was always one of the two of us that held our sanity. So no matter how suddenly impatient or frustrated we could get, the other one could calm us down, sometimes by a look, sometimes by saying, hey, can I get you in the other room for just a second? And so you can be there for each other so as not to exasperate your child. Not restoring a child gently with love is exasperating. Sometimes we can become weary with doing good when we don't treat our child with love and patience, when we discipline out of frustration. It can also exasperate our child when we create for him a stumbling block. Matthew chapter 18, starting in verse 1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of God? He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. I mean, God thought kids were awesome. He's saying, be like these children. And then he goes on in verse 6, though, and says, and this is a pretty staunch warning, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. I mean, that's graphic. And it just shows how serious God is about not putting stumbling blocks in front of our kids. Now, all of us make mistakes. I used to start marriage classes, Patty and I, going 10 minutes with all our mistakes until our kids finally said, okay, enough is enough. You were good parents. So none of us are perfect, but we want to make sure we're not doing anything that's going to really screw up our kids. Meaning, we don't want to put stumbling blocks in front of them. Lacking a good example, we'll put stumbling blocks in front of them. When our kids are experiencing us being angry and impatient with each other, or talking about other people, or with them, that puts stumbling blocks in front of them. Our example will do that. Our mood will do that. You know, one of the biggest things diagnosed these days is ADHD. And of course, the root cause of that is really genetics. I mean, it's thought that the genes you inherit from your parents are the most significant factor in developing the condition. And research will show that parents and siblings of a child with ADHD are more likely to have it themselves. But you know, the thing is that there's often things that, and now I'm going to use the word exacerbate, that will exacerbate our difficulty with attention. And one of those things is modern pace of life. And there was a doctor that was interviewed in an article in Clinical Pediatrics, and he said, I'm talking about the culture environment that prevails today, the modern way of life and its impact on the developing brain. Today's children are immersed in a world of instant messaging and rapid-fire video games and TV shows. Today's parents are rushing around and working so hard to earn money to buy more stuff that they have less time to spend with their kids. When kids get accustomed to such a rapid tempo, it's hard for them to adjust to the comparatively slow pace of the classroom. They transfer the sense of urgency they've seen at home to their academic behaviors. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is the pace in our household? Are we having trouble just even getting meals together? Are we having trouble spending time together? Are we having trouble just relaxing together? Is it that high paced? How much time do you allow your little ones to watch TV and play video games? Because again, it creates that fast pace of the mind going. Recently, you know, we thought it would be fun to show Liam some old Disney movies, you know, that we grew up on. And one of the things we noticed really quickly is that they're not as fast-paced as the recent ones. And I remember Cinderella, we were watching and Patty and I are starting to get uncomfortable because it took forever just to get through the opening credits. And we could tell Liam was just getting really bored with that. And fortunately, he had pizza to eat while we were watching the movie, so that kept him entertained and in his seat, but you could see him getting bored because we are so used to fast pace. Now, that's not going to change, and movies have adapted over the years, but we can control our environment at home. Is it too fast paced? Now, let me say this before I move on, and that is, if you're trying to slow down the pace, don't pick church and church events as the thing you want to slow down. That's not a good plan. There's other things that you can choose and you can focus on and make sure you're not getting too fast of a pace. So as not to exasperate your kids, it's very important. Do they feel heard and listened to? James 1, starting verse 19, says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And our kids are more likely to get exasperated and angry and not listen to us and obey us if they don't feel listened to and heard. They, at that point, they're going to work even harder to be heard, and they're going to work harder. And that's often going to involve anger on their part and disrespect just to try to be heard. So don't exasperate them, listen to them. I can remember times our kids were little and they'd be talking to me, and I'll confess I wasn't listening. You know, most of the time, hopefully I was, but sometimes I wasn't, and they would catch me. They'd be like, Dad, you're not listening. And even though I'm looking at them or and I'm like, you know what, you're right. I am so sorry. Tell me again what you said. Patty and I remember Sean at times when he was little, just taking our faces and turning them towards him so that we would listen to what he was saying. So here's the thing, nurture your child. And don't exasperate your child. Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to continue this class on Sunday. It's going to be a great follow-up to the video. You know what? I encourage you, after you watch the video, before we ever get to Sunday, talk about this class with each other. And I don't mean, you know, Ron wore that same shirt the week before, or Ron's hair is a mess, or, oh, I didn't like this part. I mean more so, talk about you guys and how this fits for you, and really it's going to make Sunday class even better. Come to Sunday if you haven't been able to, if you possibly can. Thanks. We'll see you later. Bye.